you know and what you see. Evangelical dreams.
You're listening to Media Tackle, tackling big ideas through analysing media and pop culture with Craig Norris, PhD. Alright, here we are on Media Tackle for another week. This is Media. In the excitement of this space, so I'm joined by Marcus again. Hey Marcus, how's it going?
All the better to be back here. How are you going, Craig?
Very, very good. Hopefully, yes. One of the things we're testing out on the show is creating YouTube and Twitch streaming. So, yes, the hope is that all that technology works. We never quite know sometimes.
We can but hope. It is designed to work when no one is watching and to crumble when we have an audience, in my experience.
Yeah. What can you... Yeah. So search for Media Tackle on YouTube or Twitch, and they should hopefully be popping up. An experiment. Anyway, Marcus, it's great to have you on. It's great that you've recovered from COVID.
Yeah, it wasn't fun. It was like a flu crossed with tonsillitis.
Right. Yeah, and do you have any patient zero vibe? Do you know where it came from?
I know where it came from. I'm not going to name and shame on the air.
Good. Yes.
But I will shake my fist at them the next time that I see them.
Fantastic. All right, so today's show, what we're going to do is explore some interesting news and oddities that have come across my desk and get some ideas. And of course, the big news about Doctor Who we'll save a little bit for midway through the show. Hopefully by the end of the show, we'll also deep dive into the video game discussion I set up last week, talking about you're playing on easy mode, and also maybe a justification for failure as learning. But first story is David Cronenberg. The film director I'm always keen to watch ever since Videodrome. And really, if you think of David Cronenberg, you often think of that genre, the body horror genre. A lot of body mutating, body oozing, body horror. Of course, probably his most well-known one, The Fly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, involving, of course, the classic story of the scientist creating the kind of transportation module, but then a fly gets in and turns himself into a half fly. The latest news, David Cronenberg, apart from the fact he appeared in Star Trek Discovery?
I could not help you there, sorry.
Yeah.
Star Trek is one of my biggest knowledge holes.
Well, it's interesting, because you had too much. You had Star Wars The Mandalorian with Werner Herzog appearing, huge European director. And then you had the new Star Trek, I'm going to say Star Trek Discovery, the new one that came out through Paramount, having David Cronenberg, of all figures, appear as a kind of interrogator character. Anyway, the news of David Cronenberg is that he is prepared for people to walk out of his latest film, Crimes of the Future, during Cannes, and he's quoted by saying, "It's a very special thing, people walking out of his films." He said he's a little freak who makes freaky films. Certainly true from those films, and he says, "I expect walkouts from Cannes, and it's a very special thing." Have you ever walked out of a movie?
Have I ever walked out of a movie? I remember my mum had to take me out of Pocahontas when I saw that when I was 4 or 5. The scene where John Smith kills Coco was traumatizing to a young tacker such as myself. Other than that, I remember I turned off... I remember when I was 16, I think. I was watching Last Tango in Paris.
Marlon Brando, the notorious butter scene.
Yeah, that's exactly where I turned it off.
Oh, really?
I thought, you know what? Apparently this is a really good movie with really good performances, and it's a serious art drama, because I was a bit of a film snob when I was a teenager. I was like, yes, I like watching serious dramas. I was like, I cannot watch this. No, thank you. I will, pardon the expression, pull out now. Also, I watched Sword Art Online with some friends, and I refused to watch it after a certain point. There's only so many attempted scenes of non-con that you can take before it becomes very off-putting.
Wow. Yeah. Look, I don't know. I've not walked out of a movie in the theater. I've kind of wanted to, but I went with a friend, and it's like, what were you gonna do? I can't even recall what it was. Anyway, so yeah. I will await. The reason why Cronenberg's saying people are going to walk out is because there are some very, very strong scenes in this film. The first 5 minutes is meant to have a really strong scene, which he says will guarantee walkouts. And then the last 20 minutes is meant to be the last straw. He describes it as the last straw for many people. He's quoted as saying, some people who have seen the film have said they think the last 20 minutes will be very hard on people and that there'll be a lot of walkouts. Some guy said that he almost had a panic attack. People always walk out, and the seats, I was talking about the Cannes cinema here, the seats notoriously clack as you get up to go because the seats fold back and they hit the back of the seat, so you hear this clack, clack, clack.
I think my favorite story of one director walking out of another director's movie was either at Sundance or it was at Cannes. I couldn't tell you. I believe it was Sundance. Wes Craven, upon viewing Reservoir Dogs, stormed out because he thought that the movie's violence was too intense.
Wes Craven, horror auteur, famous for
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger.
Lost House on the Left, The
yep.
Hills Have Eyes, would later go on to do Scream, where people get disemboweled on screen. And yeah, apparently, and there's actually very little violence shown on screen in Reservoir Dogs. Most of the violence it happens off screen, and then you see the aftermath.
So odd, because I remember the Tim Burton's Batman. They cast Jack Palance as the kind of crime boss, but he had to come. Oh no, it wasn't. It was Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers.
Yeah.
Jack Palance was meant to be doing the warden in the jail where Mickey and Mallory are interned, or maybe it's just Mickey. Anyway, he refused to do it because he saw it as too hyper-violent, and instead they got Tommy Jones to perform in that role. Yeah, and I always thought it's odd when an actor associated with violence, because of course Jack Palance has done tons of westerns, refuses to do something because they see it as too violent, right? Yeah, quite what's changed. So yeah, it's interesting with Wes Craven. Next story is keeping the film discussion going. As we all know, maybe we all know, Top Gun's finally around the corner. It's probably one of the most delayed films from COVID, I want to say, because this was meant to come out just pre-COVID, and then got pushed back. So Top Gun Maverick's around the corner. What's interesting is the casting, that they've got some of the original stars back. So, of course, Tom Cruise, Val Kilmer, back as I think in Plague Admiral. So they've got two pivotal roles back, but they didn't get Kelly McGillis back, who played Maverick's love interest from the Top Gun film. And people are pointing out that it's odd that many of these nostalgic kind of films that we're seeing a second go of are casting a lot of the male leads from the original, but none of them are casting the female lead. So there's a list of them, these films. So Top Gun doesn't cast Kelly McGillis, or doesn't include her.
Doesn't include Meg Ryan either. I mean,
That's
it's
right.
because it's
Meg
got
Ryan's
Goose's son in it as a grown man, but it's not going to have Goose's wife. So,
and it's interesting because in the article in Variety they talk about that. They say it is odd, particularly also because they don't get Meg Ryan back, because from the trailer, one of the key plot discussions is that tensions between Goose's son and Maverick. Yet you don't have that. The director was saying that he didn't bring back those female actresses because it would just put too much plot out there, too much kind of discussion. So he wanted to just what was it? It was something like, it was an interesting phrase. It was like he wanted to be careful with the connective tissue between those two films and have enough new stuff. Look, it is Look, it's one thing to describe it as that. And Kelly McGillis was interviewed back in 2019 about this, and she said she wasn't asked to come back. And she quoted as saying, "I'm old and I'm fat, and I look age appropriate from what my age is, and that is not the whole, and that is not what the whole scene is about. To me, I'd much rather feel absolutely in my skin and who I am at my age, as opposed to placing a value on all that other stuff." And that is something which you hear a lot of in terms of casting older women in Hollywood films, that there's a real dearth of roles for older women, that there seems to be a lack of ability for directors and scripts to properly use age-appropriate women, that always it's younger women. And that's the case, I think, in the Top Gun film, that the love interest, there is a love interest for Maverick, but it's a new actress who's much younger.
Not that much younger.
Not that much younger.
Jennifer Connelly's in her early to mid-50s.
Yeah.
So it's not as though they've cast someone, 20, 30 years younger than Tom Cruise. But they have cast someone who, suspiciously like Tom Cruise, never seems to age.
That is true. Tom Cruise is one of these odd Peter Pan figures. Another film which this happened in was Bill and Ted Face the Music, which I've not seen, the new Bill and Ted.
I've heard. I've not. I'm actually going to be very honest. I've never seen a Bill and Ted movie, so I'm very sorry. I'm going to have to hand over my my 80s nerd fan cards at some point. I've heard conflicting things from people who've seen it. Some people loved it. Some people said this is terrible. Why are they doing the same thing over and over and over again?
Well, there's a character, the princess character, who appears in that film, but they recast the actress. The original actress wasn't a huge star, but nevertheless, it's interesting when they cast the same actors for everything else, but not that. Blade Runner probably is the most notorious one. They do bring back Sean Young, but of course it's a CGI Sean Young, and Sean Young was notoriously unhappy with that, calling the fact that there was a CGI approximation of her 20-year-old self in the Blade Runner 2049 film as the final insult.
See, that's the only one where I would say that would be justified, given that at the end of Blade Runner, Rachel has got less than 4 years to live. So within that narrative, spoilers for a 40-year-old movie, but within that narrative, she wouldn't have aged up to the age that Sean Young is.
Good point.
That is one of the few where I would say it is justified. Another one for me is Rocky Balboa, where Rocky's a successful restaurateur and gets pulled out. He gets basically there's a CGI thing that puts him against the current heavyweight champion, and it says that he would probably win, and that's what convinces him to come out of retirement and have one more match. And Stallone decided that in order for him to be properly motivated, he would need to kill off Adrian prior to the film, because he figured that if Adrian was still around, then Rocky wouldn't want to box anymore. And you just think to yourself, he's already, he's gone to Russia and done this intense training regimen to fight against the guy who beat his best friend to death. He's continued boxing when he's had brain damage following that fight. Why would this be the one time where being happily married with Adrian drags him down?
And again, it falls into that pattern of there's very few movies, it seems, that have nostalgic movies that have gone back to mind, these 80s film franchises that have actually brought back the female leads in them as well. Trainspotting, T2 Trainspotting didn't bring back brought back Kelly MacDonald for a very brief cameo, and that was it. Independence Day, Resurgence. Will Smith passed on it, but everyone else came on board. Jeff Goldblum, Judd Hirsch, Bill Pullman, but not Margaret Collins' character, Constance. I must admit, it's been a long time since I've seen Independence Day.
I saw Independence Day with some friends a couple of years ago, but I don't recall Constance. I don't honestly Independence Day is one of those films where you remember the character's name by the actor who plays them.
Yeah, that's right.
So I know for a fact that actually no, it really astounded me. Someone was talking about David, and I was like, wow, you actually know Jeff Goldblum's character's name? I thought he was just playing himself. But speaking of Jeff Goldblum, one of the ones where they are actually sort of amending that problem is the new Jurassic World movie is bringing back Ellie Slater, still played by Laura Dern. Which is good.
That's right. Yeah, they've made a big effort to establish. It seems they've broken up in the meantime. I don't know. But
They'd broken up by Jurassic Park 3.
right. Okay, so it's
Yep.
diegetic. It's actually in universe plot. Okay, but that's great. They brought it back. So there's one film where the female star or one of the female ensemble cast came back.
There's that one. There's and then there's the new Halloween movies where they went out of their way to get back Jamie Lee Curtis to be the main character.
But that's an exception to the rule, I'd say, because that whole space coined that genre, the final girl horror film, right? So that whole genre almost was the exception to the rule, pointing out the fact that you had this subgenre within horror films, the slasher movie, and you had the emergence of the final girl narrative as a counterpoint to the fact that there are so little final girl narratives anywhere else in terms of a heroic female.
See, Jamie Lee Curtis coming back for me was an interesting one, given that she absolutely hated working on Halloween Resurrection back in the early 2000s, and her condition for coming back was that Laurie had to die in the first 15 minutes, so she wouldn't be forced to do any more of them. So it's the fact that she was so thoroughly fed up with having to be in subpar sequels and then agreed to come back for not just a sequel, but a trilogy of sequels. So that for me was the interesting part, the fact that she totally swan off doing them again, and then she went, actually, no, if they're going to be interesting, yes, I will do them. Because those films would not work if she didn't come back.
It's interesting, actors who require their death as part of the contract. I imagine Harrison Ford did that when he came back for Star Wars Force Awakens. I know Charlton Heston required it, even though he's under a lot of makeup for the Planet of the Apes remake that Tim Burton did.
And for the first Planet of the Apes sequel, he said, I'll be in the first reel and the final reel. I want to be missing in the middle, and I want to die at the end. And not only do I want to die at the end, I want the entire world to blow up at the end.
Beneath the Planet of the Apes is weird because then they cast the other male lead, which is basically a Charlton Heston lookalike actor. So it's odd because of that they had to still conform, it seemed, to a Charlton Heston figure. On that idea of representation of non-white male gender, a Star Wars Jedi developer says their requests, and this is the Star Wars Jedi video game, Star Wars
Jedi Fallen Order.
Thank you. They say this just came out a day or so ago, picked up by CBR.com, that their request for female and or black lead were denied over enough representation. That is that this isn't Disney saying it. This was the game producer company said that there's enough representation already in Star Wars, and they don't need to worry about having a female lead or black lead in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. And they would say, this came out in a tweet just saying how they felt it was kind of regrettable. And I guess it's interesting. It's an interesting article in CBR. It's worth looking at because it reminded me of the John Boyega attacks on Disney in terms of his feeling that his character was left out to dry compared to Adam Driver and Daisy Ridley, who had much more interesting or at least nuanced characters. His character, I think he was interviewed as saying that he didn't feel his character was anywhere near as developed or had any of the development. And he saw that as an issue in terms of the directing and writing staff not knowing what to do with a character of color. Because he also pointed out that the same thing happened with Kelly Marie Tran, who just seemed to not be able to be used in any way.
I'd argue the same thing for Oscar Isaac.
Right. Yep.
And he's Latino. Because he has a minor role in The Force Awakens. He has a bigger role in The Last Jedi, but in The Last Jedi, it really plays up him making genuinely terrible decisions. And then when he steps up and he becomes one of the main leaders in Rise of Skywalker, he fails in literally everything he sets out to do.
There's a funny thing, a story I came across a few weeks ago about the latest Lego game, Star Wars game, right? And there was a point in like the opening credits scene or something, or the pause screen, and the characters are moving around still. And there's a scene with Oscar Isaac, Finn and where's the character that Oscar Isaac plays?
Poe Dameron.
Finn and Poe. And of course, the thing about Finn and Poe is in Force Awakens, there's a suggestion of a bromance, and more than that, an actual same-sex relationship possibility, right? There are many fans that were reading between the lines saying maybe Star Wars is going to have two prime leads as romantic love interests, kind of homosexual relationship there that we'll see in Star Wars universe. Never came to fruition. What's interesting, of course, in the Last Jedi, what was it, the third film,
Rise of Skywalker.
Skywalker, that of course they squash that and they give Poe this really boring.
Tacked on.
But it's interesting, interviews with Oscar Isaac, he talks about this relationship with John Boyega in terms of, you know, the character's development, hinting at this kind of love romance. But yeah.
Given the chemistry those two had, just one of the biggest mistakes they made with The Last Jedi was splitting them up for most of the film.
Yeah.
Similar to, I'm going to commit heresy here and say that I've never found Empire Strikes Back to be as good as the original Star Wars. I think a large part of that is because for a lot of it, Luke is reacting to a puppet, and he shares very little screen time with Han Solo after the first half hour. Whereas one of the core elements of the original film is, you know, it's Han and Luke developing their friendship. So I think any time you have characters who do, like, if it's platonic, if it's romantic, if it's anything, if you have good chemistry and then you immediately split them up in the sequel, that's just,
Yeah,
it's questionable.
And particularly, I mean, Star Wars really holds up because those characters are not best friends at the start, right? They actively dislike parts of each other. It provides that real tension that then we see that character development by the third film. Yeah, that's an interesting point. This all sets up the idea of Doctor Who. So finally, the new Doctor's being cast. You're a huge Doctor Who fan. What's the lowdown here?
Oh, the lowdown. In terms of my opinion or in terms of fan reaction?
Well, there's two questions I want to ask. So, of course, the big news is that we're going to be seeing a black actor play Doctor Who, which I thought was the first time that the Doctor is black. But you pointed out it isn't, and I'm sure you'll deep dive into that. The other thing that's interesting that I'll ask is what character development they might take the Doctor in with this, because, you know, it's interesting in terms of, you know, Christopher Eccleston, and then David Tennant and Matt Smith and so forth. You have this idea of an old, like, they're playing a Doctor who's very old in a young body, certainly by Matt Smith, you know, is kind of in a young body, and that kind of paradox of a kind of embittered, older psyche in a younger, you know, body. What direction they might take the Doctor in next with the black actor? What are your...
That's an interesting question. Look, given that the showrunner is going to be a white man, I believe Russell T Davies is coming back as the showrunner for at least one season. I would certainly hope that if they do any historicals that they sort of, I guess they treat that with a bit of tact. It's like, don't go for the politically correct history, but also don't, I guess, try to overcorrect it and show everybody leaving the past as a massive bigot.
Because this would be the fact that, you know, if Doctor Who travels back in time, previously he's a white man traveling back in spaces where that rampant racism is still privileging his identity. What rich storytelling might be there as the Doctor's confronting racism? It's
just one of those things where I really hope that they have input from people of color rather than the white male showrunner trying to sort of, I guess, overcorrect. Because one of the really big problems that I had with Jodie Whittaker's first season was that for as much as it had a really lovely, diverse main cast, and even like a lot of the sort of the supporting characters were also people of color, which was great. It was just a really sort of like overemphasis on angry white men being the villains. And something like Doctor Who has got a lot of really good villains outside of, you know, Davros the Master and all the aliens. You look at Tom Baker's era, there are a lot of really good sort of one-off villains, and especially with Peter Davison's era too. Shiraz Jack, he's only in the one story, and he's one of the most popular characters in the whole franchise. But I guess something that I really liked is that they had when they had the second season, they kind of Jodie Whittaker, they had the Master, I believe, was played by a South Asian. I believe he was Indian. I could be wrong. But that was something that I thought was good, rather than leaning into the whole angry white man thing. They went, okay, we can have diverse villains as well. I mean, something that I always remember is when they made Star Trek Into Darkness. They were scared of being accused of being racist for casting. Spoiler alert: John Harrison is Khan, and they were scared of him being. They were scared of being accused of being racist for casting a Sikh actor as a terrorist. So they cast Benedict Cumberbatch. And of course, the Sikh community were like, well, no, we actually like that there is such a charming and effective villain in the Star Trek universe who is a Sikh. That's really actually, it's good representation because he is such a charismatic and charming villain who's always successful. And until he goes up against Kirk in the Wrath of Khan. Like, why would you squash that by casting a white actor? I can't remember what point I was trying to make. Oh yeah, so the point that I was trying to make is that I do hope that the showrunner handles it tactfully and doesn't try to overcorrect anything.
Yeah, I mean, John Boyega's experience on the Star Wars new trilogy is a really sobering counterpoint to where it goes wrong. Where, I know with the trailers for Star Wars Force Awakens, where you saw John Boyega's character take off the Stormtrooper helmet, there was this real sense of, wow, Black Stormtrooper, and at the time there was a bit of a fake kind of backlash against it, but still this kind of positivism around casting a black actor, and then John Boyega's kind of dissatisfaction with how his character developed. Yeah, so it would be hopeful that this new casting will be sincere, and
I have to say, he is a terrific choice. I believe it's pronounced Nkuti Gatwa. I could be wrong. That's just how I'm reading it. Yeah. I haven't seen him in a huge amount because I don't watch as much TV or as many films as I should probably to be on this kind of show. But I have seen him in the first season of Sex Education, where he plays the essentially the gay best friend, and he is terrific in that. He's got the whimsy and the snarkiness that you would expect from the Doctor, while also having a certain level of vulnerability. So he's 100% got the chops to play a really good Doctor. So I'm very, very keen, based on the strength of what I've seen him in already, to see him actually see him in a main role. I know he's a BAFTA winner. I don't know what he's won a BAFTA for. I'm going to have to hunt it down and watch it. Something that I often do is when a new Doctor gets cast, I do like to see the stuff that they've been in previously. Like, I remember going and watching The Thick of It when Peter Capaldi was cast as, and being very confused by it, because I think you need to have a certain level. You have to be intimately familiar with British politics to really understand The Thick of It, I think.
Thick of It is a great series, though, but it has one of my favorite sequences where he's trying to remember the name of Star Wars to another character, and his way of characterizing it is so deliciously crude in terms of what it is. But yeah, in The Thick of It, notice, and again, it was interesting. I'd known Peter Capaldi from The Thick of It before he was announced as the Doctor, and I was really intrigued if they'd continue that idea of Capaldi's-ness, brand identity, being a kind of angry guy, and they kept that. I mean, I felt the Capaldi run was very much his, like it was him as a kind of angry old guy.
See, I actually the impression that I got from watching Capaldi was that after you've seen Matt Smith playing an old man in a young man's body, Capaldi getting a new set of regenerations, it felt like he was a stroppy teenager in the body of an old man.
Yeah.
And stuff like the sonic sunglasses, and he comes out playing electric guitar on a tank. He just feels like he's an edgy teenager trying to be cool, especially wearing the hood with the long coat, which is just such a teenager look.
Now, you pointed out to me that this isn't the first Black Doctor Who.
No. So in Jodie Whittaker's second season, they introduce, I believe her code name is Ruth initially. She's a black woman, and she's an incarnation of the Doctor prior to William Hartnell.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's a very good pick. She was the actor that got to play her did a very good job of playing sort of like a more old school version of the Doctor.
But in a quiz show, do you reckon this would be one of those gotcha questions in terms of who was the first Black Doctor Who or something.
Oh, that would
and it would get-
absolutely be a gotcha question because they reveal in that series of Doctor Who that the Doctor is not a Time Lord; they're an alien from a different race. And that's where the Time Lords discover regeneration, and they reverse engineered it from the Doctor. And because they show the Doctor's childhood, like several of them are black children. So if you really wanted the gotcha moment, you'd pick out the child actor who played the Doctor, who was a person of color, and say, yeah, that's actually the first ever Black Doctor.
It reminds me, I mean, just that I've not seen that season, so I had no idea until you mentioned it. It reminds me a little bit of the midichlorian, the addition of the midichlorian narrative to Star Wars, and how many fans kind of felt that's not the Force they knew. What was the fan reaction to is it a kind of retconning of explaining why the Doctor now has more than 12 generations?
Look, they'd already explained that because at the end of Matt Smith's tenure, he gets given a new set of regenerations by the Time Lord so that he can go and save Gallifrey, which is locked away in a pocket dimension. Look, from what I understand, the reaction to the idea that the Doctor is not a Time Lord, that they have infinite regenerations, and that regeneration was reverse engineered from the Doctor. I personally did not enjoy that twist, and I don't believe it was a particularly popular one. I think a lot of people thought it was there for the sake of having a twist that was... Yeah. And I don't know. To me, it takes away a lot of the fun of the Doctor being just a very average, albeit highly educated member of this society who just goes around having adventures because it's what they enjoy doing. Similarly, the Doctor is Jesus thing that was pushed in the Russell T Davies era, followed by the Doctor wins things because they're the Doctor and everyone's terrified of them thing that they pushed in the Stephen Moffat era. The Doctor went around for several years wearing a celery stick on his lapel. He had a clunky old robot dog that looked like it was something out of a disco era. I don't know. The idea of the Doctor being Jesus, or being this undefeatable force of nature, or being the secret to all of elongated life from timeless society. I don't know. I dislike it.
It's a tricky one. I mean, in terms of when follow-up material tries to just avoid the implications of what the previous material did. So, the Last Jedi to the third one, I completely forget the name all the time.
Rise of Skywalker.
The fact that Rise of Skywalker pretty much exists as if Last Jedi never happened, and all the plot narratives are just abandoned. Similarly, like I've been watching the Picard, Star Trek Picard series. I know it's not your wheelhouse, but interesting in Picard, at the end of season 1, he becomes this weird android hybrid human Uber figure. But it seems in the new season they just kind of forget that happened to him, and they try to turn him back into a normal human character. Anyway, it's interesting.
That's just the best of both worlds from the Next Generation, where he gets assimilated into the Borg, and then they have to save him in the next season opener.
Yeah,
that to me is one of the best cliffhangers ever, because they had the writers had no idea how they were going to resolve it, because Patrick Stewart's contract was up and they had no idea he was going to come back. So they were like, well, let's leave the option to write him out of the show, and if he wants to come back, we'll just bring him back in.
And that was quite clever script writing in that case, I think.
But it's one of those things where when you know that he's coming back for the next season of Picard, and you're going to just retcon the whole thing away, why even bother?
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that major plot twist in future Doctor Who episodes.
I do get the feeling that once Chibnall leaves, they are just going to quietly forget the whole regeneration started with the Doctor, because they often. I mean, there are a lot of sort of future plot threads that have been set up that they've gotten rid of. I mean, in the Seventh Doctor's era, they were starting to imply that there was more to the Doctor than we'd known previously, and that they were one of the founders of Time Lord Society alongside Rassilon and Omega, and that was building up to that. And then when the show ended and it came back, they just went, right, cool, that can just leave. We don't need to delve into that. And that for me was a good decision, because again, the idea that the Doctor was one of the 3 founders of Time Lord Society, and not someone who squeaked through the Time Lord Academy with 51% on the second attempt. Because the Doctor was, it's strongly implied that they've always been lazy and work shy. So the idea of the Doctor being one of the original founders of Time Lord Society to me is laughable. Also, the Valiant never got picked up on, which was meant to be negative energy given off during the Doctor's final regeneration, and then the Valiant comes back and he's the main villain of the Sixth Doctor's second season. They just forgot about that. And I guess reasonably so, given that I'm pretty sure that the actor has passed away of old age by now, because that was 35 years ago.
And look, with Doctor Who, you really are looking at encyclopedic fandom in terms of the world building that's been going on in Doctor Who over half a century, 50 years?
60 years.
60, yeah. So,
It's one of those things where I think that trying to add in major twists like that, because it's going to be taken over by a new writing team in a couple of years, and they're going to try to put their own stamp on it. And this has been going on since the early 1980s. Basically, prior to Eric Sayward taking over as the script editor in the early 1980s, the writing staff deliberately kept the Doctor's past as vague as possible.
Yep. So no one would be shackled to, this definitive canonical explanation. And it's better for the fandom in many ways to have questions that they're asking during a show. And sometimes the worst thing a series does is try and explain the origins.
It just reminds me of when Yahtzee Croshaw reviewed Hitman Absolution. He said that he viewed Hitman games as being very similar to Columbo, and that the less they're about the main character's personal life, the more interesting they are. Because Absolution tries to give 47 this really major character arc and delve into his origins. And it's like, I just want to be a bald guy who sneaks around, strangling people with piano wire. I don't need to know his backstory.
Video games, excellent segue to the next piece I want to chat about, which is, so it's Doctor Who, and this is a piece on Cracked talking about how best to maximize your video game enjoyment. There was an article, I gave it a brief look over myself, that came out in 2018 that was researching leisure time and talking about, it was a project that looked at how leisure time best works in today's busy world. And this article was talking about, obviously, within video gaming, you have people who min-max a video game. They define min-maxing here as minimize damage taken and maximize damage output, which I think is a pretty good definition. I've always tried to sum up what min-maxing is for a video gamer, and it is where you're trying to minimize the damage your character's taking and maximize the damage you're giving out. An interesting thing about the video game min-maxing identity is that you might think the best way to minimize your work time and maximize your leisure time is schedule it in, really carefully to say, okay, between this time and this time, I'm going to play video games, and I'm going to, just really carefully, plan my day out. What's interesting, this research has said that precisely scheduling leisure activities turns out to sap the fun out of them, right? Especially if they're followed by further onerous tasks like more work. So the article goes on to talk about if you're planning to play a game during your lunch break and then hop into 3 hours of back-to-back work meetings, you may not be as refreshed and kind of leisured up as you'd assume. So this research was claiming that, if you have a vague idea of when you're going to have leisure, right? So you might say, okay, I'm going to, let's say it's something as banal as I'm going to do the dishes, right, after dinner, and it's probably going to be around that time. But sometime after I finish doing the dishes, I'll get around to playing my games. That headspace, that you're going to do it around a time or after an activity at some space, is meant to dramatically increase the enjoyment because, and again, the research points out that it's meant to have more of a spontaneous feeling to it, that the leisure is happening spontaneously. Which is interesting. I mean, I'd like to look more into that research in terms of the importance of spontaneity as giving more leisure. Have you experienced any heightened dopamine
Heightened dopamine.
by spontaneous leisure activities compared to planned leisure activities, like a micro planned, like at this hour to this hour, 20 minutes.
I find that, well, it's not gaming, but it is similar. I find that if you plan to go to the pub, generally you have a bit of a fizzer of a night. But if you just randomly say to a friend, "Hey, let's go and get on the beers," generally those are the really enjoyable nights at the pub. I guess is probably the best analogy with which I can come up.
That's actually quite good, I think, and I think many people would agree that spontaneous call and suddenly you're going out, does, I think, ignite more satisfying leisure than if you've planned that time and then maybe you've thought about, okay, I need to catch the bus at this time or I need to organize that. I think that's quite a good analogy.
But in terms of spontaneous leisure, I remember when I finished Doom Eternal a couple of years ago. One of my favorite games ever. One of the best FPS games ever made, and it's very, 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 very intense. You can adjust the difficulty whenever you want to. I'm pretty sure I finished it on normal mode, which is it's tough enough as it is. So basically I was playing it on Saturday around, I think I started at 10 in the morning. I finished it around midday. And I had to, my fiance was getting ready because we had to go out somewhere. And unknowingly, I got up to the final boss and managed to beat the final boss during this time. And it's one of the most difficult final bosses that I've ever had to fight in a video game. Because basically you're fighting against, spoiler alert for a 2-year-old game, you're fighting against the Icon of Sin, which is this skyscraper's tall demon. And you're on top of a building while fighting it. But because the way that Doom Eternal works, you're never just fighting one enemy, because you actually replenish your health and ammo and armor by doing special attacks on weaker demons. So almost every other demon variety in the game is attacking you while you are fighting the Icon of Sin. So it's a complete and total rush. You're always frequently getting down to like 20% of your health. So you've got to go around and you've got to do glory kills to get health back. Oh, I'm out of ammo. Better find a weaker enemy to chainsaw. Oh no, running out of ammo. Better armor. Sorry, better go and find someone to set on fire and I'll get armor from that. And it's just this endless gameplay loop. And in the meantime, you've got this massive kaiju-sized demon who you're trying to kill at the same time. And it's just such an intense experience. By the end of it, I was sweating and shaking, and my breathing was just... my heart rate was through the roof. And I had not said to myself, okay, this is my scheduled time to play Doom Eternal. I just sat down to play it. It was like, oh, I'm at the final boss already. And I was just glued to it. So in terms of spontaneous dopamine from playing a game, yeah, that's definitely... whereas if I've got the day off, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll play a bit of a game. I'll just sort of flick through whatever I feel like playing. But it's like, unless you get grabbed by it, it's a very different experience.
That is interesting. Look, and certainly the great games and their ability to ignite that adrenaline through, triggering that fight or flight mechanism, that classic satisfaction of a hard final boss. Because of that. And did you, one of the interesting things, and we might set up some of it, but pick more of it up next time because we're nearing the top of the hour, is this idea of playing a game on easy mode versus hard mode. Did you mentioned, I think, that you defeated that first go, or that it was a tough battle, but it was one that you managed to get completed that afternoon.
Yeah, the first, because it's in 2 phases. The first phase took me a few goes to beat. The second phase, I beat it first go, but it took me a very long time because I had to keep running away from the fight against the Icon of Sin to replenish my health, ammo, and armor. So it's a very, very, very balanced fight because the game gives you all the tools that you need to beat it in one go. You just have to be smart about how you're playing the game. It took me about 40 minutes, I want to say. It was a long fight, but by the end of it, it was just nirvana. But another game by the same studio, Wolfenstein: The New Order, I played that on normal difficulty, but the final boss was so difficult, I had to crank it down to very easy. I legitimately just could not beat it on normal because it was so cheap.
Yeah.
And I was playing it at 2 a.m. I had a rehearsal the next day for a Shakespeare play that I was in. I was like, I just want to beat this final boss and see the ending. And that's what I did. I just cranked the difficulty down to the final boss. And that was, I really do like games where you can change difficulty during a mission if it's too difficult.
Yeah, because what else are you going to do? You're going to stop playing the game and then just watch a YouTube to try and give yourself some closure.
Although two of my favorite games ever are GoldenEye and Perfect Dark for the Nintendo 64, and Perfect Dark was on the Xbox Live Arcade as well. So their missions, there's no no option to save in the middle of the mission. A mission's going to be finished in between 5 and 15 minutes, depending on how long it is. So you play an individual mission in one sitting. And changing difficulty settings not only changes how much damage you deal and how much damage you receive and how much ammo you receive, it also it will increase the number of objectives to complete depending on if you're playing it on easy, medium, or hard. And so if you're trying to finish it on Perfect Agent or 00 Agent, and you keep on you go through a corridor and your brains are sliding down the wall because you didn't pick your battles properly, you just crank down the difficulty and you can just start the mission again on a lower difficulty. It'll be much easier to complete. There'll be less to do. Enemies will die in less hits. You can take more damage, and then you can just keep on going because you're only sacrificing 5 to 10 to 15 minutes depending on which mission you're playing.
Well, this is a topic we'll pick up in the future. I think you've set up some great homework for everyone listening at home to between next week to tackle a final boss somehow, somewhere, hopefully in a video game, as opposed to real life, and contemplate hard mode, easy mode, middle mode, normal mode, I guess. And I guess there's a scholar that talks about video game death is the death you learn from, right? That experience of kind of death and learning in video games. Yeah, maybe there's something more general to apply to life there. So, yeah.
I do have one final point to make. In terms of the death that you learn from, that's why playing fighting games on hard mode is always a good idea. It's really good practice for when you're actually fighting against someone who can exploit the bugs in the game and can play the metagame. So if you can't beat the AI on hard mode, you are going to struggle against someone who knows what they're doing.
Yes. And the
Very
sense
good
of
practice.
satisfaction you'll get for actually overcoming a tough opponent. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you, Marcus. That's been Media Tackle for another week. I hope you have a great week.
You too. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And keep listening to Edge Radio. We'll have more exciting news and music, of course, around the corner. Adrian's coming on to play his great show. That's been Media Tackle for another week.
Blue moon, what you pay?